Hello.
It is. Okay.
Okay. Hey, welcome. Hey. I'm going to talk about making Wi-Fi robots. Um, which is the game running downstairs on the cabinet, and this kind of, I don't know. I've got Unity open here, but I feel like it has come further from being a game. So. Do you want to? So I'm going to tell the secret origin story of how I started making this game. So the very first thing there was somebody posted up, this organization in London posted up a thing saying, hey, we've got this cool commission opportunity, send in a thing for what the cool thing you're going to do for this thing is. And I saw that and I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to think about that. And I, actually strategically went and had a shower, I think, in order to come up with a good idea for this.
I think showers are a really underutilized planning moment. I sometimes deliberately go take a shower when I'm trying to figure out an algorithm or something. I definitely can respect that.
Exactly, yeah. So, but I did this, and I went and I sat in the shower, and it was something that uses data in this kind of surprising way. It was for some organization that's all about data, and I was like, actually, you know what's really interesting? Wi-Fi data is really interesting, and there's this news stories that from years ago about how people can track you, these advertisers can track you as you're walking along the streets. They just track whether you went into stores by looking at your phone and tracking the Wi-Fi signals you're sending out. So I was like, I'm going to do something with this. I'm going to make this little installation thing that will sit in the lobby of this organization because it's for a physical thing, and it will just tell you every time you walk by. It will just tell you how many times you've walked past this installation. And you'll go past it every day, and the number will just tick up, and you'll just be like, man, that's creepy. And that felt like a good experience. And then I looked at the commission again, and it said that they were looking for things that were uses of data that were funny, humorous. And I was like, damn, really can't think of a way to fit this great idea into actually what the commission is. Now I've read it again and read it properly. I was kind of stuck with now this idea that I was really excited about that had no place to go. And that lasted for about, I don't know, probably about a year or so until Fantastic Arcade came along and had the opportunity to get involved. And I was like, what do I want to do? I'm like, I want to do something with Wi-Fi data, yeah.
So how far did you initially develop this?
The idea
in the first wave?
The first wave, I had a shower. That was basically it. I maybe wrote down some stuff in a notebook, but I basically had a shower, and then I looked at it again, and I was like, damn, that's not the thing I've come up with an idea for. I don't have a good idea for that one. I've got a really good idea for the thing I thought it was. Fantastic Arcade came up, and it was kind of this question of what so it was kind of I was like, what do I want to do? I'll make something with Wi-Fi. So then I was like, okay, well, obviously that idea doesn't work as a game. It's not interactive enough. That's how games work. So what can I do?
That's what they tell me anyway.
I came up with this idea, and it was quite different from the idea that you see downstairs. And the idea was still pretty uninteractive. And the idea was you'd have this arcade cabinet, and the arcade cabinet would have two little doors. No, wait, actually, I'm gonna find this because I have the thing that I originally wrote to Fantastic Arcade to pitch the idea. It's gonna load. Okay, so my original pitch. You approach the cabinet. There are these two little doors. Ideally, these glow. You put your phone in one of the doors. Someone puts their phone in the other. You close the doors. The game detects the phones, picks up a unique identifier from the Wi-Fi. It then generates a unique character with particular stats, attributes representing your phone. These characters have a battle based on the generated stats. One of them wins. And it's a fun thing to see how your phone matches up against other people's phone. The game can keep track of how many fights each phone has won, just because it has memory on it. And that feels pretty exciting. And also the weird thing of just putting your phone in a little hole and closing it, and then you can't touch your phone whilst the game is going on, or else it'll stop it. You can't take a photo of you playing the game. You just have your phone surrendered into this box, and you just have to let go of it. Felt pretty wild.
That's pretty fascinating. I like that you don't really have any avenue of control You're just kind of rooting for your phone.
Right, exactly. But, it's more interactive, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're putting your phone in a box, not just walking by a panel. So, interactivity increasing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's a permissible amount, really, if you'd gone with that. Like, I don't think anyone would be wanting for more agency there. That's compelling enough, I think.
Yeah. I started developing this stuff and started looking into like how do you actually read Wi-Fi data, which I was like, yes, I feel very, very confident that this is a thing that I can do and a thing that I can build and so on and so forth. Let me get into my little folder of all the stuff so I can see talk screenshots. So I started this like log of all of the as I was developing stuff. So actually, I wasn't even sure if I was going to use Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. So I did a poll on Twitter. I seemed like the scientific way to discover which I wanted to do. And most people had Wi-Fi turned on. So I was like, yep, that's fine. Should probably band it Wi-Fi battlers or something to indicate this from the outset. Yeah, good call. Does your phone have Wi-Fi turned on?
No. I usually leave it off for privacy reasons, actually.
And I was like looking into like even like Wi-Fi standards and like just looking at this like list of all of the different Wi-Fi standards there are, like gave me this whole I don't know, like this accretion of like things, and you can see like the I don't know, things changing over time, like CDMA1 with all lowercase except for the 0 of the 1 being uppercase. Like that feels like a real mood.
So if you get a single packet,
that's
from
really
a device
1991.
that's trying to connect to like hotspots and whatnot, this is all in each ping.
Oh, so no, actually, this stuff is just different. Like, because I was like, oh, actually, the other thing you can do is you can just detect there's a phone, it's connected to a cellular network. Your phone is pinging off saying, hey, I'm connected to a cellular network the whole time. But to do this would take like, I don't know, a couple of $1,000 for the hardware for it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I'm only paid a couple of $1,000 for this commission, so that seemed like too much. Yeah, and I just really like the like CDMA1 is like 1991, and then Hyperman.
Oh my gosh.
WiMAX. And you can see all the names where it's just like, this is, Edge was back then, and then we've got Evolved Edge and LTE Advanced Pro. WiMAX 2.1. Why whatever. It's just kind of interesting to look at. So anyway, yeah, I started looking into this, and it seemed like I could use a Raspberry Pi to connect to stuff. So I started looking into this, and I just started getting it running, and it was just not running for various reasons that I'm not going to go to now. Yeah, so this is like basically me looking at all of these different approaches and trying to get stuff running, and this was actually pretty good. I found this nice paper here. Let's see if I can open it here this way, which is a study of MAC address randomization in mobile devices and when it fails. So this is the thing actually. Wi-Fi, your phone sounds like a Wi-Fi signal. It has this unique identifier, the MAC address, which is this like universal address identifying your hardware. And yeah, you can be tracked by this, and mobile phone manufacturers were aware of this, and so have started to try to do stuff to mitigate this. And one thing they do is they just say, if you're looking for a hotspot, just randomly scramble your MAC address. And then they do it apparently badly, according to these papers and according to the research I've done.
So question, I know that there is actually deliberate surveillance built into cell networks, which is utilizable by supposedly ethical organizations such as our government. Is that part of this protocol, or is that separate?
So now I'm talking about just Wi-Fi itself. So I'm looking for Wi-Fi hotspots. So I don't know about that cell network stuff. I did not look into that beyond seeing that it was going to be too expensive.
I think it happens further up the chain, speaking as a former AT&T employee. Yeah, you're right. It definitely does happen.
And actually, somebody who also worked in the telecoms industry, I can say that like the worldwide cell network protocol is really insecure at the high levels. Like there's this wild thing where if you try to ring, if you've got your number and you like port your number across between networks, when someone tries to ring you, it goes to the original network, who then forwards it on, who then forwards it on, who then forwards it on. So any one of those in the chain could say, oh yeah, no, it's with us again, and intercept.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah,
It's like everyone has the mail address to your childhood home.
yeah, exactly.
And so you get all these letters that are like forwarded 5 times. That's fascinating.
Yeah, there's lots of like it's just basically like all of this stuff that's kind of in the background actually turns out to be made by people and is kind of shonky and bodged together and works well enough, and people argue about it and so on like that.
So, kind of higher level question. So, I'm sensing a lot of interest here in kind of the human touch in these protocols and the ways that these possibly invade or violate our privacy. But there's also this very whimsical, like battling monsters kind of thing going on. So, I'm curious about like in your headspace at this point in the process, like where do those touch? Like, what's the compelling connection between those?
So, I mean, I started off definitely wanting to emphasize the, hey, this, like I started off very much from the, this is creepy, like, you know, and I should tell people about this. And if I'm making a game about this, then it, you know, probably ought to be at least somewhat like, you know, charming and fun. But you should kind of play it and go, wow, that was cool. And then you like think about it a bit more and you're like, wait, it's kind of fucked up that you can do that this game could work. Or the implications should like feel a little bit on it and put you a little bit on edge, but it approaches in a kind of lighthearted way. So that was the kind of approach I had.
Okay, so it's kind of a bait and switch. You get this like shiny, familiar commercial exterior, and then you're like, oh no.
Yeah, but like no one wants to be preached at also, right? Like, and like I'm as interested in the kind of shiny thing, and like, I mean, that was actually a process I've went throughout this process. Of I started going like, oh, this is you know, it's terrible that people can do this, or people should know you can do this, and I started doing it, like poking into it, and I'm suddenly like, oh, this is just really fascinating. It's just like the texture of this is really interesting, and like the fact that, you know, our devices are like just kind of chirruping away to each other, like saying, oh, yeah. Here's the thing, like, are you around? Oh, I'm not around. Or like, am I okay to send some data? Yes, you're okay to send some data. Oh, cool. Okay, here's some data. You know, just all of that stuff is happening in the background feels like really, I don't know, it actually does feel really whimsical. But yeah, like, so this, you know, I was looking at even academic papers into this MAC address randomization, which had this beautiful sentence in it, which was basically about how so iOS devices randomize their MAC addresses entirely. Most modern Android devices still have the first section, which identifies them as Android devices, and then the rest of it is scrambled. And they said a thing like, yes, iOS devices have this scrambling, it's great. And then suddenly they did an app update in the middle of us doing this paper that totally took away a load of the benefits. They now put this unique identifier, so you're like, yes, this is definitely an Apple phone, even though it's scrambled it. It's kind of their incredulity came through in this really nice way through in the academic language of it. Yeah, so I think I'm now up to the point that I can start just showing you some screenshots of the process.
So this is still battling monsters at this point?
Well, yeah, so I was doing a lot of work into, hey, how can I actually get access to this? How can I get this working? How can I get... And I think I was starting to assume that battling monsters wasn't going to be able to be possible. At the time, I kind of gave up on having a Raspberry Pi because the battling monsters requires, if you think about it, you need to have 2 Wi-Fi sensors, 1 in each box, and you need to have like a hardware switch that tells when the things are closed.
Right.
So it can tell there's one in this one and then there's one in this one. So the original idea was I was going to have like a little Raspberry Pi baked into each box, and then they were going to talk some protocol to the computer that was actually running the game. And then it was like, and actually then I looked into it and I was like, oh, actually the problem is that phones actually only ping out their signal if they're not being touched or not doing anything every like, I don't know, 10 minutes sometimes.
Oh, wow.
Because, you know, they're trying to save battery. And like, if you put your phone in a box, then you have to wait 10 minutes for it to do something. That sucks.
Right, so the rhythm was interrupted.
Yeah, and then I saw ways of like, oh, if I was like sniffing all the Wi-Fi data, then I could get the MAC addresses, and then I could send a ping saying, "Are you there?" to all of the devices I've seen, to all the ones in that, and then at this point I was like, okay, yeah, this is probably not going to work.
Wow, so that's you probably had to scrub a lot at that point. It seems
What?
like it requires a pretty big reconsideration.
Yeah. So like, but then I started going like, oh, actually, maybe I can just get this working on my laptop. And it turns out that like actually, Apple Macs have the kind of cards that can capture this kind of stuff. So should we capture some data now? So this
I
is
switch on my Wi-Fi now.
yeah. We can see your phone. I mean, so this is filtering. I can't filter off like signal strength like I can in the main game, but we can just see all of this data kind of coming through, and like, so this is all the stuff that my laptop is picking up on all the Wi-Fi network. Well, and all these kind of channels. You can see it goes into the special monitor mode setting. So we can already like kind of go in and see all of this stuff, and it's kind of amazing. Like, even just like like seeing all of this stuff here.
So people don't even need to be like connected to the Almo Wi-Fi. This is just like their phones just kind of advertising.
Yeah. This is all the Wi-Fi networks that are just hanging around, or phones that are pinging around, just various ones.
What a list! I'm just amazed at the volume of it.
Yeah, like there's like thousands of these.
And this is just like your computer's wireless card.
Yes,
This isn't even
yeah.
like a router.
Yeah. This is just whatever this machine can pick up.
So there was a huge push in this country at one time by AT&T to get Apple to, because AT&T's network wasn't able to deal with all the data from iPhones. There was a push to, we'll put Wi-Fi networks in all of the Starbucks and in all of these like kind of ubiquitous locations, and there was a push for Apple to like tell people that there's a Wi-Fi network so they can please connect to it to like save our dying infrastructure that we don't want to update. So I think that some of this might be a result of that sort of like constant polling for finding Wi-Fi SSIDs.
Yeah, so there's a particular type of signal, probe requests, which phones do when they're looking for a Wi-Fi network. So this is the thing they just send out the whole time, just like every so often saying, hey, is there a better Wi-Fi network around? Like, let me know if there is one. And sometimes they broadcast asking for particular Wi-Fi networks. So this is the thing I was kind of focusing on a lot. So yeah, you can just see a lot of kind of different devices through in this. And you can see also like they're broadcasting mobile networks. So like my phone, when I ping it on, it's looking for a particular mobile network that I connect to at work. And so I just keep seeing that in the kind of logs again and again. I don't know. So it's kind of interesting to see this.
So compelling.
It's interesting to see this, and it's interesting to kind of look into this and see, oh yeah, like there's these like different like vendor-specific tags that you see it send, and you can use this to identify what phone is which. And yeah, I mean, I basically got kind of really lost in like looking at this and kind of understanding this and learning this a bit better to try to de-anonymize phones that I can see around in the environment.
This is 100% the first time at a games festival that people have gone through a list of Wi-Fi data logs and someone has said, that's so compelling. Fantastic arcade.
Look, you can see like the like raw bytes of the thing, and then it's just got like the network name in it, and you can see this is the base station, and this is the anyway. Yeah.
What's that wonderful cryptic thing on the right with all the ellipses in it?
Which this thing?
Yeah.
So
what is that? That's great.
That's like just so in the packet so the packet is each kind of signal that's been sent out, and this is just the raw bytes within that packet. And it's a dot where it's not something that's representable as ASCII characters, and it's the ASCII characters when it is. And then so it's the equivalent here written out as like hex codes. So when you highlight a particular bit, you can see it there.
So that actually is the block on the left. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And so like I did like a bunch of things of just like, I check my phone, and sometimes it sends this thing and sometimes it sends that thing, and like what parts are repeatable between different devices to de-anonymize them.
So as someone familiar with the rabbit hole as an emotional phenomenon, what was going through your mind as you were like getting so into the structure of this and the minutiae of it? Like where was this leading your design process?
So like this was pretty fascinating. At the same time, I was also starting to build something in Unity. So let's see if I can get these screenshots in the vaguely right order. Where was I at? Hey, here's a load of images from when I was doing stuff. I was also looking at like maybe I can get better signal if I just like fill the stuff with tinfoil and use tinfoil to just focus in the Wi-Fi signals. That's probably a cheap way of, search for Faraday cage foil. So yeah, then I started like digging in, and I was doing a load of stuff, just actually getting like the right plugins working so that I could try to embed this and get it talking to Unity and get this data into Unity. So these screenshots represent like like just lots of time of like learning a load of C++ that I didn't know before. I'd done like a tiny bit, but I had to learn way more in order to use this library. And then I started going like, okay, I should start making some graphics. So I started making these cute robots. Cute robots. Picked out some fonts, kind of this kind of stuff. Yeah, here's some C++ there. Faraday cages you can make at home. So yeah, then I started getting stuff into Unity. So here's a screenshot from around that time. Yeah. Let's just makes that larger. So you can see here, hey, these robots exist. They ping when we see a thing, and there's by their feet we can see like a load of kind of data about them. So SSIDs that they're connected to. S-House Creative. I work at a place called Somerset House. That's my phone. These vendor IDs, which are some of these unique things sent through. We can get the signal strength, we can get the noise. So I've got this kind of stuff here, and I've basically just made a fancy visualizer at this point.
So at this point, these are like modular sets of sprites, yeah?
Yeah. So I used the MAC address and used different parts of that to generate the different kind of parts of it in the hopes that, because the MAC address, as I mentioned before, the beginning is often set by the manufacturer. So the first half of this like six segment long thing will be the manufacturer, or like often they're like kind of similar but slightly varied if they're similar devices. So I figured actually representing the robot parts as directly from the MAC address made sense.
And then these rings, I imagine, are like signifiers of like the ping events or something.
Yeah. So these are every time it sends the data, it sends out one of these. And at this point, it was every like 10th of a second. So you could see, this one's kind of existing. And already had the thing, which we have in the final thing, where they kind of fade out after a while. So here's the thing of like, you see a device and then it goes away. How do you kind of represent that? So yeah, they fade out. And this actually came from when I was looking at kind of doing the graphics and doing the kind of nice stuff. This is when I was first doing it, and I was like, oh yeah, they look really good when they're all slightly not opaque. So now they come in opaque and then they fade out, so you get that nice look from the graphics.
It reminds me of silkscreen.
Yeah, so like I was definitely like thinking about like risograph printing.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of a big like the kind of colors that you'd get from that and the kind of aesthetics of that and the kind of like I don't know, focus on forms there. And then this also comes from like I don't actually generally do that much art, so this has been a really nice process in terms of like learning how to use Illustrator and like kind of saying, I'm going to draw a thing and I'm going to think it looks good and I'm going to present that up front and center, as opposed to like making something that looks nice by designing around not trying to draw anything. So I kind of sweated over these kind of a nice amount. So yeah, and then different types of things coming out as they send different kinds of signals. I just really love and then I was like trying out because I really wanted this to work. I still hadn't given up on the Wi-Fi battlers thing, so I was like, oh, maybe if I just really, can I zoom in on this? Yeah. Welcome to WLAN world. It's just so lovely and friendly. So I still hadn't given up on Wi-Fi battlers. I was like, well, okay, if I get the right kind of Wi-Fi cards that I can use remotely on OS X, then I can put them on USB extension things. I can put those in there, and I can maybe get this working. And so I was continuing to go down rabbit holes, and I really wanted to get it to work on Windows as well. So then I, went over to Windows and was like trying to get all of this stuff working on that side as well. Mm-hmm. And like largely like struggling and failing to get all this stuff working. I've got a whole box of now new external Wi-Fi antennas that don't really work. So and then at a certain point I was like, okay, yeah, I should actually, put all of this stuff that's actually I think really interesting. So, I've definitely got something that's interesting here. I should, time's getting on. I should make a game that uses this, right, as opposed to just like, yes, I've turned up. Hey, yeah, this is a really nice visualizer of Wi-Fi signals for this arcade machine. So I thought down a couple of routes. And the first route that I kind of thought down was like, it's kind of like a Robotron thing, because like I'd drawn these nice robots. So you've got these robots, and then you shoot the things, and they send fire when there's Wi-Fi signals. So that's kind of a really nice direct thing. And then there's a second idea.
Right, I like that connects with the temporality of it.
Yeah.
Because my first thought looking at these was like some sort of generative space based on the data. but I like the immediacy of that.
Right. I mean, it was also just like, so like the big scary thing is like until I got here, until today, I did not know what the Wi-Fi landscape was going to be of the space of when people are here. I still don't really know because I've been upstairs here most of the afternoon. And so like I'm designing for something where the primary input that this is based around is something I'm not going to get a chance to see until it's too late. So it's kind of like, what can I make sure that's definitely going to be fun? And it's like, well, okay, moving and shooting is fun. You can make something where moving and shooting is fun even if, there's lots of stuff or there's little stuff. And then the second thing was like, okay, maybe I can make something, and felt a bit too risky, but kind of interesting was this kind of generative space, but maybe like focused on music. So you're like making this musical visualization. You're picking out particular robots to make particular noises, and you're trying to make something cohesive out of that, and you've got this kind of feeling from it. And then the final thing I went with, which is what I went with, was like I was like, no, you should do something slightly more kind of strategic, where you're trying to hack stuff. This is doing the arcade graphics for the side of it. So where they're connected to each other, and instead they send signals to each other every time they send out a ping, and then you're trying to take over them. So you're trying to use this kind of knowledge of which robots are likely to ping off, or which ones are doing it more often, or also if you start with your phone, you can then make your phone send a load of signals, and then you can start hacking people, and that's a good way to get going. And I was kind of stealing a lot from the game Euphoria, actually. I was definitely like, it worked for them, that kind of taking over planets and gradually swarming over. I don't know if people have played that game. It's pretty good. It's worth stealing ideas from. So that kind of actually brought me up to like more or less the game that we have here. And I think like an interesting thing about it is, it does, like playing it, you'd already have this thing of like, okay, so it starts off and it says, hey, what's your phone? So you've got to first identify your phone. And then once you've identified your phone, like you then take over stuff, and you can take over stuff by like, I mean, in this case, you can actually take over stuff by like, I don't know, going onto Instagram and refreshing. And that will send out a load of packet data. So that's your attack at the beginning, is you're using that. Or you're spending half your time interacting with the thing and half your time poking at your device to make it do a thing that you then see reflected. So it's this kind of, like Tyreek was talking about, like having this thing where like somebody's playing, but other people can kind of interfere, but they're not entirely playing as a whole thing. I feel like I've kind of ended up with the same thing where you can, but your input mechanism is your phone. You poke at your phone, and that is an input to the game, as well as the actual joystick.
I like that you ended up approaching the cell in a different way when you changed the way things are manifesting in the game world. What are some of your thoughts about that shift? Because it's a pretty big one. Yeah, I mean, so you're initially approaching it as this sort of bait and switch, right? Like, there's this like glossy, cute game, but oh wait, it's invading my privacy, et cetera, making people think about wireless data. And now in this format, it approaches the same thing in a kind of a different way. So what are some of your thoughts about that?
Right, yeah, I mean like this, let's make this large. Like this is the thing that this is still the same text you get when you get to the end. It's like, and now it's going for the whole kind of slightly cartoonish, you're an evil hacker kind of approach. And yeah, like I mean that's, I don't know, like I still like the kind of bait and switch that there was before there, but it felt like if you're going to be hacking stuff, if you're like doing this kind of slightly more strategic thing, then like there's this rich tradition of video games that are about hacking, of like, Uplink and all this other kind of stuff, or Fortune 499. Wait, no, not that.
Playable Downstairs?
Yeah. Sorry, I actually meant Beglitched. I got confused between similar games by similar people.
Playable 2 years ago Downstairs?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so there's this like wonderful rich tradition of that. So it's kind of like, it's like the thing that you do in video games, except slightly more real. Still not quite real, but slightly more real. Felt like a kind of an easy way to make it a bit more familiar. And like I've been very aware with this that it's sufficiently weird that I need to spend a bunch of effort just explaining like, like the things you see on screen, yes, they're actually devices around you. Like you need to spend a bunch of effort just explaining that and kind of getting that across. So saying like, yes, you're hacking it kind of hopefully helps you get some of that way. There's a reason I kept the name like Wi-Fi Robots. It's just like, I feel I need to put the words Wi-Fi in there really up front and center. So when people approach, they're thinking about Wi-Fi and they're like, why is this called Wi-Fi? If you have that a little bit left behind, I feel like it's like much harder to pull off that twist and make that twist compelling.
Mm-hmm.
In a lot of countries, they say Wi-Fi.
I don't believe you.
Spain, I know for a fact, they say Wi-Fi.
Oh, maybe. When I was working at this telecoms company, I started being somebody who'd say smus. We'd say smus at the company. Yeah, and then I started having this actually is kind of interesting how like some of the graphic stuff, like these bits that come in from the side, originally came from working on like an announcement image and the graphics for the cabinet. And having worked on that, I was like, I need to do something to decorate this, like more than just the robots that look nice. What's kind of again easy, like rectangles in this kind of isometric grid. And then I was like, oh, actually this looks good. And then that ended up being something that was within the game. So it's kind of interesting how like graphics in the game happened because I was making them for the cabinet sides or making them for announcement images.
There's a thing that happens, I think, where we, probably because we mostly encounter commercial products on a vaster scale, assume that a lot of the commercial materials are created in a vacuum after the fact, right? And yeah, with smaller projects and even with larger projects, that's not really always the case.
I mean, I think there's the way of thinking about games that I have that I think you can see a bit in this project, where it's kind of like the quote it was about theatre originally that I've kind of super stuck by is like a play starts when you first hear about it and ends when you forget about it, like, and kind of thinking like the thing you're making is this full experience. So like you start playing this game when you first hear about it and then you actually play it and then you're talking about it and like that's the entire experience, and you should be thinking about how can you make that entire journey, not just the bit when you're actually playing the game, good. And obviously the bit when you're actually playing the game is the bit you have most control over and the bit where people are probably most engaged about your game. But I don't know, like the earlier talking about Bit Trip Runner and saying how like, oh, I played this, I only got halfway through, but I still love this game. I'm like, that's totally valid. Or so yeah, it's kind of that similar thing of like, I don't know, doing game design by naming your game a particular thing because that helps explain what the hell it's about. That feels totally normal and valid and kind of part of it. And it's also kind of like, even with kind of commercial things, it's like treating the marketing you do as an artistic output.
Right.
I mean, also it has to, hopefully make people give you money as well. But, so does the inside of the game as well. So
I find that sort of thing so interesting, especially in this era when a lot of smaller productions are going in very non-conventional directions in terms of like how things are produced, how transparent that process is, what community engagement looks like. There are a lot of opportunities to sort of rethink that trajectory these days.
Yeah.
I think looking at it all as part of the process in an integrated way is really the direction we're headed as a culture, but it's a lot of kicking and screaming we have to do first.
Yeah, I mean, like, but also, I mean, from just with this game, like, kind of part of the scary thing is, hey, I've made this game, and like, the mechanics of connecting these things and then going between each other and that kind of stuff, like, I could test it a bit, but I couldn't fully know what it's like to play it until it arrived here and was in the Alamo Drafthouse with like fantastic arcade numbers of people in the Alamo Drafthouse. Like I came by earlier this week to kind of see what the Wi-Fi situation was here. Just because I was stressed about it, like how many routers are there? Is there a Wi-Fi network? Will people be connected? Because that'll change the kind of data they said. Like I was kind of interested in that kind of stuff just already. So I don't know. It's interesting that you can't plan around that. And also, like, I feel like a lot of this game is about people standing around and trying to identify their phone and, like, doing the thing of looking at the visualizer, like, say, like, noticing the difference between, because you can kind of see the difference between these kind of like dashed lines and the solid lines and the dots. These are different types of signal, and so different types of device send out different types of signal, and kind of having that discussion between themselves. But it's the kind of thing where, unfortunately, you can't actually like playtest a discussion that happens at a festival around the game, because you need to have a festival to do that. So yeah, I feel like it's higher stakes to design on that level than just whether it works as a singular experience within itself.
So on that note, thinking of this as something that will be downloaded and played in contexts other than the Fantastic Arcade venue, how did you approach how you want that to work?
Right. So, I mean, how I'd love that to work is you can download it and then you run it and then it picks up the signals that you've got around you and you can play it in a kind of similar way, and you can kind of use this and maybe even start like booting up the game at various places because you're curious about what the Wi-Fi situation is at various places.
Right. It seems like interrogating those structures that way could be really interesting.
Right, exactly. Unfortunately, like, you know, the faff I've had trying to make it actually work, even kind of singularly in terms of connecting to the right hardware and stuff like that and working on Windows. So I was like, oh yeah, actually this is hopefully going to work for some people, but for a majority of people who download it, it's not going to. So actually what I did was when I came here earlier this week, I captured, I think like, I don't know, like 5 minutes, 10 minutes of Wi-Fi data at the venue. And I've made a version where you play it and it just plays back that like captured amount of time on a loop. And if I get a chance, and this might be a bit tricky because of these various things, my laptop is actually the one in the machine. So it might be a bit tricky to do this, but if I get a chance, I hope to actually capture some data during Fantastic Arcade. And then I can actually update the version in the bundle to be like, yes, you can play it, and you can hack the phones of people who were at Fantastic Arcade.
Trapped in amber.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which I don't know, feels kind of interesting, and like it's not quite as satisfying, but it is kind of interesting again, actually. I mean, in terms of the structure, in terms of them connecting to each other, it feels interesting that structure suddenly becomes repeatable, suddenly becomes something you can examine in more detail.
Following that thought, I know it was a rabbit hole of research that took you to where you are now, and part of that was a hardware-based thing that made it end up being a OS X only app. Is it going to be possible for this to be ported to other platforms?
So basically the thing it entirely depends on is having a Wi-Fi card that can support monitor mode. So monitor mode is the thing that allows you to listen to Wi-Fi networks that you are not connected to, and that's half hardware and half firmware support for that. So I think I have a Windows build that if you did have firmware and a card that supported that, it would work. But there's only a couple of like chipsets that support that, so I've not found one of those, and I gave up on buying more and more different external Wi-Fi adapters that could maybe support that. So I think but like I've also seen some stuff for like phones where it says that's maybe supported, so it's like super hardware dependent basically.
Since this is necessarily, because of these kinds of dependencies, kind of like an open, it's almost like you're opening source on a hacker project rather than like distributing a game. Are you going to try and like engage with people that download it and like, okay, this is how maybe you could play with this?
Yeah, totally. So I mean, I haven't given that as much thought as I should have, because I've mainly been trying to come up with a good experience for this. But like, I definitely, having made the kind of framework that allows me to plug this into Unity, I think that's kind of interesting to explore. I mean, there's a big community the normal way of people monitoring this stuff is they use a particular like hacker's distribution of Linux that has this kind of stuff in. So I'm kind of curious as to, I don't know, maybe I can make a distribution of Linux that would work with that. I don't know.
Or maybe even like show people how to do like a Raspberry Pi build that has the necessary like.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, I was starting to look at Raspberry Pi stuff at the beginning, so I think it's possible. But like basically, I like went far enough down that rabbit hole to kind of go, oh no, pull up. This is not the productive way. But it clearly is a good way, and you know, Unity can run on Linux now, so. a Raspberry Pi build, and then you can download this thing, and you can like the actual chips, like the actual external cards that work with a Raspberry Pi are not too expensive, or I think even some Raspberry Pis have the right chipsets in them. So it is like I don't know, if it works, then it should be like a less than $50 thing, but I didn't manage to get it working. So
I know we have some hardware hackers in the audience. Do you want to take any questions or anything?
Yeah, so actually, just as we start taking questions, I might actually fire this up and get Loren to actually play the game, maybe. Might be interesting.
Oh, I was afraid that maybe it wasn't playable up here because you said your laptop was in the computer.
Oh no, I've broken the cabinet temporarily for this talk. But yeah, no, like let's have some questions whilst we have the game running.
Just raise your hand. I got legs.
It's just.
So if this gets a little too nerdy,
No,
just
do
stop
I?
me, because this is kind of my day job, working in InfoSec and networking and things like that. I'm well aware that you can set up your card to be in like access point mode, and you had mentioned the whole idea of bait and switch and sort of showing off the amount of data that we send out wirelessly. Was it ever a consideration to maybe make your computer an access point to then tap into other kind of data sets and to make something interesting? And then my kind of follow-up really quick question is, because you're mentioning that you have a packet capture of all the data going on right now, could I, as a person who has the game, I don't know, spin up a Wireshark packet capture and put that in the game and to have that data be part of the playable set?
Yeah, so actually this is actually something I was considering doing and didn't do because UI is annoying, of having a thing that allows you to select what packet capture and have like, oh, hey, here's one I captured when I was on the underground at home. Or, you know, like having a thing where like send in a packet capture. If you're able to capture this, send it in and I'll include it in the game. So yeah, like I definitely was thinking about that, and like the format is just, it's a Wireshark packet capture is the input embedded in the game. In terms of like setting up as an access point, like I think this came to like that kind of like creepiness thing where definitely it feels like there's a like, in terms of creepiness threshold, and in terms of like, you know, just pure ethics and everything like that, saying like, if you're playing this game, then it's fine that it's looking at data that your phone is sending out. But if it's actually sending out data, or if it's actually talking to your device, then that suddenly crosses a line for me, definitely in terms of like, I'm not saying that's like necessarily immoral or unethical or not something you could do, but it feels like it's like a, I don't know, the bait and switch is like, it starts off being like, haha, hack them. And then it's like, no, but they're real. And then it's like, but you're not actually hacking them, if that makes sense. And it feels like if you dilute that last bit of like, and you're doing something to them, but you're not really hacking them, but you're doing then that maybe makes that kind of muddied.
Tell us about what we're seeing up here. I see, are those the human readable names? Are those SSIDs of like routers and stuff?
Yeah, so the ones on the left are the names of routers. So there's a bunch of different types of packets that contain SSIDs, like either a router saying like, hey, this is my name, or a device saying, hey, I'm looking for this router. Are you there?
This is more or less guaranteed to pick up something that's sitting right next to it.
Yeah, it should do.
So if I'm like pulling Twitter, it's probably sending out packets.
If you're connected to the Alamo Wi-Fi network.
Oh, I'm not. I should.
Yeah. Otherwise it
I'm
will.
not gonna futz with it. But
When you turn on Wi-Fi, it will at least poke it. So, and so one actually thing that's kind of interesting with this is there's particular things, like I think I briefly mentioned the kind of prefix for different manufacturers. So one of the prefixes is DA. What is it? DA-A119. So that's the Android prefix, and that has, I was pointing on this screen, that's useless to everyone, the blue head with the sticky out bits and the hexagonal body. So any robots you see that look like that, those are Android devices, modern Android devices, that are doing this particular randomization. So you can see that one on the like kind of light purple circle with that one there saying S House Creative. That's my phone. That's this one. This phone here. And because the de-randomization is not super amazing. It's not the best. It's reasonably good. Therefore, sometimes you see lots of them, and it's just because they've turned up lots of times because your phone has randomized its address and turned up as multiple different robots. And sometimes the randomization succeeds, in which case you can see the robots like flickering between different shapes as they scramble their IDs, but unsuccessfully. So
Interesting. So it knows that it's continuous.
Exactly, yeah.
Interesting.
But it's appearing as a different thing, as a different robot, so it's represented by the robot now has a different shape.
So if we're connected to the Alamo Wi-Fi and we start just like trying to refresh Instagram a whole bunch, will we be like helping
so that
Alamo robot?
So that will look like, you see those like solid circles? That's a data packet. So where you can see a lot of those solid circles, that's somebody sending out a lot of data connected to the Alamo Wi-Fi, because this is the correct channel for the Alamo Wi-Fi. And so yeah, you can see, like those ones that are sending out those signals,
So
that's
if you
data
say
going onto the
this
Alamo
one-
Wi-Fi network.
I'm doing my part over here.
And then the directionality isn't really one-to-one with what's happening on the network, right? It's just that something is sent from that device.
Yeah. I considered doing like some things where like, I mean, like a thing again, like I was kind of didn't want to push too far down this because just explaining what's going on and making that clear is kind of most important. But then I thought, oh, maybe I can add more strategy by having different packet types send out differently. I think there is a little bit where one packet type sends out to everything it's connected to, and the others just send out randomly to one of the ones it's connected to. So if you've got multiple connections, you can kind of fiddle that. But honestly, it's a little bit too chaotic, and understanding how it connects to the actual, I don't know, signal environment around it is kind of more important.
Do you have any more questions from the audience? No, Zach's over here. He knows about Wi-Fi.
I was so captivated by the idea of putting your phone in a box and having it battle another phone.
Right? Isn't that a good idea?
That's such a great idea. I suddenly, I had wondered two things. Like with your exploration of Faraday cages, were you thinking that the two boxes being in such proximity, there'd be a problem where, like, the phone from the wrong box gets detected? Like, do you need to separate the two mystery boxes by Faraday
I was
cages?
hoping if I just like lined them with metal, then it would be fine.
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
I started exploring that a bit, but because I didn't have a antenna basically the thing I really wanted was I just wanted like an antenna on a stick or an antenna on a cable, so I could put the antenna in a box and discover this.
Right.
But until I could do that, I couldn't properly explore what that would be like in terms of Faraday cages and that kind of stuff.
I wondered if you could you put your phone into the box with the requirement that it not be off, right? Like, so it's not in sleep mode, and you put the phone in the box, and then inside the box you have like a mechanical lever that like tips the phone up, because that's like a lot of OSs are like, oh, I'm being interacted with, and so maybe you'd get
I thought about that.
The Wi-Fi ping.
I actually thought about that, or like maybe you have like a robotic thing that like pushes the I don't know, home button or like the power button on the side.
Right.
But then I was like, wait, there's just too much variety in where those buttons would be for this to work. And then I was just like, okay, yeah, seems like it probably won't work, but maybe,
Thanks.
People are going to be terrified to make arcade cabinets for us after seeing this. Going to have to think they're going to have to make a nuclear fusion reactor or something.
Like there are people who like do that as a hobby.
Oh, yeah, there was
Make fusion
there was an
reactors,
Eagle Scout who made a fission reactor in their backyard, and their house got turned into a super fun cleanup site. It didn't end well. There's a great book about it called The Nuclear Boy Scout. On that note, do we have any more questions? This has been so much fun. This is one of the most ambitious and unique things that anyone has made for this event before, and I'm terrified by it, and I've been on edge up until now, but I'm really glad that you created this, because this is a really unique and wonderful thing. Do we have any more questions from the audience? Let's go ahead and have a warm round of applause for V and for our guest interrogator, Loren Schmidt.